Welcome to day 4, number 75. 3/4 of 100, Frank.
Oh, no, 3/4 of 100. I was told there would be no math.
I think that's 3/4 of 100, or a quarter
yes.
short of a century. The century
75
mark.
shows, yeah.
Should I get you a belt when we hit 100? The century belt, 100 day
Do I have
fours
to
with Frank
hold
Scalish.
it
You could
up?
hold it. You do whatever you want to with it. It's your show. It's your belt.
Or wear it over my shoulder?
That would be ideal.
Perfect.
That would be ideal. Recorded show today, Frank. Currently, I am plying the depths of Oneida Lake for
bronze
gold.
And hopefully you are smashing said gold.
Yes, hopefully the bass track is just lit up right now. But
Well,
who knows? That's neither here or there.
The beauty is you're going to be smallmouth fishing.
Right now we are in studio, and we are picking up where we left off last week.
Absolutely.
It is summertime. Electronics are in play. The pontoon boats are out. The tubers are out.
The partiers are out in droves, especially on the weekends.
So but the bass are also out.
Yes, the bass are also out. So, we go back to last Thursday's show where we discussed a lot about finding structure, finding the right structure, different types, and so on and so forth. This show today is going to be about something that I started doing a number of years ago while fishing Bassmasters, because I had the ability to do it because the lakes that we were going to are not a lot like the lakes that I fish in Ohio. We had a very different structural element that I learned how to fish and love it. It's one of my favorite things, and that's standing trees. Now, I don't mean the trees that come out and break the water's surface. I'm talking about the deep trees that grow 60 feet of water, 50 feet of water, and they come up to about 15 to 25 feet below the top of the water. And I'm going to show you how to find them. And there's tons of lakes all over the country that have standing timber in them. And remember, I'm calling it standing timber because they are trees, but there's a lot of water over the top of them. They're not coming through to the surface. So submerged trees, standing timber.
Frank, I remember the first time I tangled with standing timber submerged trees. I vividly remember it. It was 2013, and it was the BFL Super on Broken Bow in southeast Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And now I had seen a little bit there's some little areas on Eufaula that have it, and there's some other areas that have some trees, but it was the first time that I had put my boat in, and I knew it was clear, and I knew there were spots and big largemouth and smallmouth in there, and I just had the 2D at the time and stuff, and I idle over, and I went, oh, wow. This is a lot of water column with a lot of places that fish can suspend it. And sure enough, they ended up suspended in there. And I just remember the feeling of how intimidated I was.
Oh, yeah.
Because there were so many different areas and so many trees and so many different depths, and it was hard to fish them all. And, I got out of there with a 6-pound limit of spotted bass, but that just sticks with me of... This is a whole nother realm, a whole nother underwater world. And then obviously a lot of those Carolina lakes, Hartwell, Murray, that type of stuff. Does Murray have them? I know Hartwell does big time.
Hartwell does, Smith does, Table Rock for sure.
Table Rock, big time.
Big time. That's where I cut my teeth on it. That's where I really started to dial it in. And to be really honest with you, that's when I became insanely intrigued with it. Then I took it to Smith, and then I took it to Amistad, and I had some really phenomenal days on those lakes fishing nothing but the trees. Now, obviously, you got to do it when it's pertinent, and now is the time. Now this is the time. The cool thing about standing timber is I'm going to make today's episode is literally going to make this easy for you guys. We're taking the intimidation out of this, not the hard work
Hmm.
in finding the right trees, but the intimidation of where you're going to look for these trees. Um, I'm even going to talk about some of my favorite crankbaits to fish over these trees. And today I'm talking about crankbaits. Last Thursday, talked about crankbaits. Um, the main focus is
Hmm.
crankbaits right now. But standing trees, the crankbait is an unbelievable tool. Now, yes, you can slow roll swim baits over them and stuff like that. Um, I know that, but we're going to focus on cranking because it's easier. All right. It's easier and it's effective. So, realistically, you have about three things that you have to think about when you're fishing standing trees. What's the water depth over the trees? So how high is the top of the tree? Is it in 15 feet, 10 feet, 20 feet, 25 feet, etc.? And actual bottom depth. So are we in 45 feet of water, 35, 50, 60, etc.? Okay. And then the other thing is the thermocline. There will be no fish below that, no bass below that
So that's
ever.
pretty key to identify after seeing that statement. I'm just
Ex-
saying, logically here, you really probably need to figure out how to make sure you're looking at the thermocline.
Well, yeah, exactly. Now the
Yeah.
thermocline will show up on your locator. If you turn the sensitivity up, you'll get a fuzzy line. Like you'll have a bottom reading, there'll be a
Hmm.
fuzzy line. It's very distinct. And then everything above that is the thermocline. So what you have to do is you got to go, okay, the thermocline's in 40 feet of water. So you know that you're never going to put a lure below that. In fact, you're probably never going to put a lure in the 38-foot mark either, for that matter. But those are the important things. I'm losing all my maps and notes here. They're falling everywhere. So that's the important thing. Now I'll show you what to look for on the map. So here's kind of what I like to look for. So when I'm looking for standing timber, picture the lake as the landmass that you're looking at around the lake. You see all the valleys, you see all the points, you see everything, okay? So we're going to picture it like that. So everywhere that I have a yellow line on the map is a long finger. It's a long finger that sticks out. All the white spots on this map are the deep valleys. So you could see the main river channel runs through diagonally across the center of the map. And then we got some secondary channels in there as well. So all the yellow lines that I put on this map are the long fingers that go into the main river channel. All right.
Hmm.
That's where I start looking because I want to find the trees that literally are 15 to 25 feet below the water surface. That's really my main focus on these trees. I mean, on these
Fishable, the
points,
most fishable trees.
the
You can
most
reach them
fishable
with a
trees.
plug.
Correct. Because if I go over 100 feet of water, chances are the trees are going to come up to 60 feet and I'm never getting a bait down there. Plus, I'm probably below the thermocline at that point. So this is what I'm really targeting. So on a map, when you look at your map, you'll see fingers like this. Matt, can you go to the next map? Not the side imaging. The next map, B. I guess it would be B.
I most certainly can.
All right. So now what I'm going to show you is fingers right off the main river channel. Directly off the main river channel. So these fingers are directly off the main river channel. This is where these reservoirs start to funnel down and into a more defined river channel. So these trees are even easier to find because if you notice, they're the longest fingers that come out to the river channel. So now you're seeing the common denominator between all of these points. And this is the common denominator. I need access to deep, deep water. And so that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah, so
So
now you've eliminated a lot of the standing timber already because you know that
100%.
you're looking for standing timber that's between 15 and 25 feet. It's the most fishable. You know you're looking for standing timber that comes up and is adjacent to the main river channel so the fish can pull up. And you know that based on your average size tree, which might vary depending on when it was flooded or what it is, that you can maybe, if you have a graph, that you can set your depth to 40 to 60 or 60 to 80 depending on when they come up. So now you have the three things that you're looking for, and instead of it looking like a forest, now you're looking for specific stuff in the forest.
Exactly. So, and then understand this too. If you guys look at the wilderness around you, most of the trees that grow on top of these um, ridge lines, they're all hardwood trees. Okay. And that's kind of critical. The other tree you're going to see is cedar. You're going to see cedar trees. Cedar trees are narrow, they grow straight up. Your hardwoods, your oaks, a lot of branches, a lot of treetop to them. What you won't find out here is willows, stuff like that. Willows traditionally grow near small stream sides, river sides, flatter, marshier land. You find the willows. Okay. So what we're really concentrating on here is hardwood. You're not going to find a lot of pine trees in this stuff. The pine trees deteriorate right away. They're shallow rooted trees. Most of the time they collapse and go away once the lake's flooded over a period of time. So really what you're going to find out here is cedar trees, hardwood trees. Okay. Very important to know. The more the fish like the tops, and some of the trees will have a lot of branches on top. Some of them will just have thick branches and all the rest of the stuff deteriorated. You'll figure this out as you're fishing it, and you'll know by how your lure is coming through the tops of the trees. So what we don't want to do is we don't want to pick a bait that is burying you up so far in the trees that you can't walk it through the branches. We're only concentrating on the tippy tops of these trees. Most of the bass in these trees are suspending high up into the top of the tree. So we know from our winter jerkbait stuff and our cold water applications that suspending bass feed up. So we want to keep the baits above the bass.
Iceberg. Think iceberg.
Yeah, yeah.
The 10% that's above the tip of the iceberg. There's a whole bunch of stuff underneath it, but you're just focusing on that top 5%.
That's a really good analogy. I never even thought of that. Speaking of iceberg, I'll have some ice water.
You actually fashion a glass of ice water at home?
Yes, I do, because I talk a lot. And so if my throat gets dry, then I'm going to be coughing a lot.
No, but I'm talking about like you take the time, you have a glass, you put the ice in it, and then you put the water in it. I just do like the water. I mean, that's like restaurant style to me. I just do the warm water bottle or just drink straight from the spigot or plastic cup on the fridge. Like I'd
use the hose, but it doesn't reach this far.
That's a mature beverage choice there. You got the glass and the ice and the water.
Exactly.
I really need to step up my beverage game. And I legit right now I have 4 drinking glasses in the house. The rest are like Billy Sims barbecue cups or plastic water bottles, and 1 Yeti. And back to the business at hand. Iceberg.
We have taken a massive detour.
Iceberg. You're focusing on the very tip top. So there's a bunch of stuff there.
Right.
Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it. Sometimes the bass will be above the trees. Sometimes they'll be just in the tree tops itself. Sometimes they'll be 3 or 4 feet into the branches. Okay. That's not going to matter, because those fish are going to come up for the bait because they're feeding up. Any of the bait fish that are suspending will also use those tree tops. So this whole food chain goes on, mid water column, right above those trees. The whole food chain goes on right there. I've used other techniques to catch them out of treetops. CC spoons, very good vertical. Drop shotting, very good vertical. You just stop the drop shot before it gets to the top of the trees, and you do the same thing with the spoon, and you actually see the bass come up to get it. So you're video gaming it. Okay. Um, that's when the crankbaits are not working at their finest, or the fish get neutral, and you got to really get in their face. Most of the time, though, most of the time, the crankbaits get them. Here's why: we make our cast, and here's where, you know what, I'm getting way ahead of myself. So here's where line diameter, rod length, this is where this stuff is critical. You have to have at least a 7.5 to 8 foot cranking stick. Somewhere in between there. Has to be. I'm always cranking with 12-pound fluorocarbon, and sometimes I'll go to 10 if I need to get it deeper. Like if the trees are 25 feet, for example, I'll go to 10. Now, the whole trick to this is you rifle the cast out, and you have to bomb a cast out, because you have to get the crankbait ticking the tops of the trees. You don't want them burying in it. You just want them hitting a branch, rolling over a branch, and you could feel all this while you're cranking. You can feel it. When you come into the branches, the worst thing to do is pull it, because if you pull it, you make it want to dive again, and it rams into the stuff. You just slowly maintain your retrieve rate. You'll feel the rod start to load up, and the crankbait will walk itself right around the branch, correct itself, and continue on its way. Now, that being said, okay, how you approach the trees is also important, okay, because you're going to establish something. One day I was on Amistad. I'm going to give you an example because this illustrates it to the T. I was on Amistad. A buddy of mine is a truck driver, and he said, "Dude, I'm going to be in Del Rio." I said, "Well, crap, I'm going to be in Del Rio at the same time. Why don't you meet me, and we'll fish Amistad?" So he had gotten there, and I was there for a couple of days before he got there. So I already dialed in on this pattern, and I actually dialed in on it by an accident. To be honest with you, I was catching fish on jerk baits shallower, a lot of small fish. And so then as I started to progress my way out, because I look at it like this: when you're fishing, you have choices. You can target small fish, or you could try to find a better bite. Knowing Amistad, if you're not catching fours and fives,
In the
you're
heyday, yeah.
yeah, you're not on the deal. So I started to back off. Well, as I started to back off, the trees were, way out of reach for the jerk bait. So just by sheer smallmouth bass guy, I just grabbed my drop shot and my spoon rod, and I dropped it down on top of one of the deep trees. And I saw a streaker come up for it. Boom, I got him, and it was a 5-pounder. And I was like, holy smokes. So I did a couple of trees like that, and I caught a few. I see some streak up and then go away. Some would streak up and go away. And I'm like, what the hell? You know what I mean? They're not committing to it. So I said, I wonder if I can get a crankbait down deep like that. So I backed way off the trees, bombed a long cast, started hitting some of the branches with the trees, and then sure enough, boom, boom, I started clobbering them. So then I said, well, okay, let me go fish trees. So I started milling around just randomly, fishing deep trees, and I wasn't catching them. And then every now and then I'd catch them. So what I did was, when I would catch them, I put a mark on my GPS where my boat positioning was. Well, when I zoomed out on the GPS, it came like, it was so stupidly obvious where the fish were really coming from. So, AKA the first map that we put up, the yellow lines, all of the fish were coming from the longer fingers that stuck out from the rest of the stuff. So here, in other words, if you look at, go to the top of the middle top, right there. So if you look at those two lines that I got right there, okay, those fish were coming from those points that stuck way out. All right. Now the blue spot where the line runs perpendicular, right there where you are, That's actually a hump. That's actually a high spot with a bunch of isolated trees on it. That was the other place they were coming from. Okay, isolated humps and long fingers. Now, if you notice to the right of the yellow line, it says 32 feet, big flat 32 feet. I'm sorry, Matt, zoom out a bit. Right there, stop. The long point where I got the long yellow line on the point, right above your hand, right above your marker. Now go to the right of that. There's no mark on the flat to the right. Nope. One more over the creek. Yeah, right there. I cranked those two and was not catching them there.
Mm-hmm.
But every time I went to a long, skinny finger of trees, I caught them. Or an isolated hump where there were no trees around it except the ones on the high spot. I caught them.
Okay, let me ask you this. Do you think that there were fish in all these trees over here, but it was like a Lake of the Ozarks dock deal? It just spread them out because there were so many and it was hard to find them. And this actually pinpointed where the fish would be. So it's not like this is a dead zone. It's just why hunt for them when you can pick them off.
Right. And that I believe that wholeheartedly because there's no reason they wouldn't be on those other places. But these were the easiest to target and it made life really simple for me. So anyway, so back to the story. So my buddy comes down and I've got 8-foot cranking sticks. And my buddy comes down and all he's got is a 6.5-foot cranking rod.
Was your buddy stop fishing in 1975?
No, he just doesn't fish outside of Ohio.
I got
you. So I'm bombing these casts, and it's like every cast I'm catching them, and I'm moving. Like the minute I catch a couple of 4 or 5 pounders, I mark it and I run to the next point, and I do the same thing, and I run to the next point and do the same thing, et cetera, et cetera.
Dialed in. Yeah, absolutely. You knew when that 100%. Thing was sailing through the air that it was coming back attached to a big one.
I knew without a doubt, and it was money. So he's like, I can't. I'm not feeling the trees. I said, you're not casting far enough. I gave him one of my long rods, and then he started catching them with me. That's why I'm telling you this is a critical component. The length of that rod and the pound test line you're using is a critical component. Now, I use fluorocarbon especially because it sinks, so I can get a little bit more depth out of my crankbaits, especially on a bomb cast, a long cast. I can get a little more depth out of it. Mono kills the depth. So mono's out of the question. Braided line has no stretch. So what happens is you're stuffing your crankbaits in the trees too much and you're snagging them all up. You need a little bit of give so the crankbait can do its job and the crankbait can do its job and walk around the wood. All right. So very, very important stuff. Now, I usually put the boat deeper, cast it up the break, and run it down the timber. Because as you crank the bait, it goes deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. Okay? As the bait comes closer to the boat, it starts to rise up again. So if we go to the first side imaging shot I got, side imaging A, I believe it is. Let me see. Yes, side imaging A. This is actually a perfect illustration of what you are going to encounter on these structural elements. This is exactly what you will encounter.
I thought that was an ultrasound. Sorry.
It might be. Who knows? If you're an alien, perhaps. So that's what you're going to encounter. So the yellow line I have should be the path of your
okay. So this where I'm circling here. This is where the boat is, right up in here.
Yeah, my boat will actually be a little bit farther back than that, but that's all the image I had.
But this is where it's landing. This is where the bait's coming down. So it's going.
Correct. Okay. Exactly. So any suspending bass your bait's going to be just above the suspending bass, and that's how you're going to catch them, even if you're ticking the treetops. Now, notice you just want to be ticking the treetops. You don't want to be buried in them alive. You want to just be ticking them. So now I'm going to go into something, and I was kind of going to wait, but I think. All right, well, let's go. Let's not wait a minute. Let's see what.
Do whatever you want.
Let me just show you a couple more side imaging pictures, and then we can put them up. Then we could put them up. Then I'll talk about the baits.
That was
the
a
lure
great
choices.
illustration there.
Okay, so
I will say before we show, I love that you had that on it, because every crankbait, regardless of what brand it is, every crankbait in the Norman brand bomber has a different trajectory.
Right, and I have that here.
Fantastic.
See that? Woo! A little teaser.
Awesome.
That was a teaser. So go to the next one, which I think if I see it, I'll know what it is. It might be the hump. It might be. That is
not it.
Oh no, that's not the hump. That's the second one, right? That's
yep. You
okay. You can put the second one back up.
Okay.
That's what you're going to kind of encounter on those long, very long fingers on the main riverside. They'll come way out. They'll be a little bit irregular, and then they plummet into the main river channel.
Are those fish right there hanging right off the edge?
They sure are.
Holy cow!
Yeah, and there's bait fish on the other side of my X. There's actually, you can see, if you see the 3 white spots that you pointed out.
Yeah, right there.
Okay, so if you go to the left of that in that treetop, and there's 2 on the treetop.
There's one right there.
Yeah, see that? Okay, this is the 100% best illustration on Earth that you can have, because that's exactly how they relate to the trees. 100% exact. Okay, so that's a long tapering main river ledge. Now go to the next one, and this is an isolated hump. The next one is remember the little isolated bump I showed you guys? This is what that looks like. This is a crazy thing. That's what that looks like, where those single trees are, and the green line goes over to the top of those single trees. That's the isolated bump. The point comes out, drops down, then comes back up again. And those isolated trees where the green line is on top of them, those are money trees. You can fish those in several different directions, money trees. So what I would do in this case is I'm going to change my angle of my boat position around that to see if there's a particular way they want that lure coming. Okay, these are the 3 best illustrations of standing trees, submerged standing trees that I could find.
So then your thermocline is typically going to be somewhere around in here.
Yeah, the thermocline will somewhere be in the middle of the trees, basically.
Shoot across.
Correct.
And you'll see it.
Right. So that's what we're looking for. Now, this part here, I'm going to talk about 4 of my all-time favorite crankbaits to fish standing trees with. And I'm going to talk about certain principles with these baits, and I'll describe them, and then I'll show you a diagram that I did just before we came on. My first
hand drawing.
Hand drawing this week? Yeah, it was a quickie. You know, it was a fast one.
You are keeping all these, right? Do you have a file folder you're putting all over here?
I have a stack of paper.
Okay, do not get rid of those. I have an idea for them.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about my 4 favorite crankbaits, and I'm going to talk about them in order of favorite and why. And then I'm going to show you why. Okay, so my first and all-time favorite, especially for treetops, is a Norman DD22. 2 reasons specifically why I love this bait. The first reason is a DD22 swims down to depth, which I will explain in a minute. It swims down to depth. But more importantly than that, This bill design on the DD22, as long as that bill is, okay, and where the pull point is, this bait comes through wood better than any crankbait, any deep diving crankbait made. This is my number one favorite crankbait for this technique is a DD22. Bar none. It will come through almost anything you throw it in. And here, you're fishing super deep with these things. So you want this bait not to get lodged in the branches, or you will lose 1,000 of them. Okay. So the whole key, like I said earlier, the whole key is once you feel the bait starting to make contact with the tree, you just keep your even retrieve. If the bait's having a hard time bouncing free because of this bill design, if you stop it, it will float backwards. And then you can continue on your way. Nothing hard, nothing erratic when you're in the treetops. Everything is done with intent, and you'll not lose 1,000 baits. Okay, that's number one. DD22, insane deflective characteristics in wood, and it swims down to depth, which I will explain in a minute. My next is a fat-free 7. A fat-free 7 is a faster diving plug, meaning it's not going to swim, it's going to dive a little bit faster.
Dig. Is that a
Okay,
word?
right.
Good word? It's going to dig quicker.
It's going to dig quicker. It's not a straight diver, but it's a fast diver.
Okay.
Okay, it pulls a little harder. You can feel it pulling a little better. This also walks through wood extremely well. All right. And I'll explain when I use each one of these. So this is a fast diver, right? Now the next two baits I have are tied for third. That is the Norman NXS and the Strike King XD. Okay, these are hard diving baits. They dive straight down. They go right down to the nitty gritty and they're getting right in it. Okay, these baits here you have to be careful with, because if you're fishing trees that are too shallow, these baits will dive way into the middle of the tree, which you don't want. So I'll throw these on a little bit of deeper trees so I can get them down and get them into the deep trees. So we have three different things. We have a swimmer, a fast diver, and hard divers. Okay. So now let's go through the chart, because ta-da, we have a chart.
Oh, beautiful.
Captain, we have a chart. Am I on this thing? Am I on the page here?
Looks fantastic.
Okay, so here.
Maybe just a tad the opposite way you think it should go.
Oh, the opposite way.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So
It's the easiest way to do it now with people out there.
Right.
It's the opposite way you think you should move it.
So the orange is the DD22. Swims down nice and easy. So you see I can keep it right along the tops of the trees. As I get closer to my boat, it wants to stay down a little bit, and then it starts to swim back up to the boat. Okay. So here I have my fat-free 7, which is a fast diver. So it goes right down, gets right into the trees. As I break the trees, it might want to dip a little more. And then as I get closer to my boat, because now I'm fighting the bill angle, it's coming up with me. Okay. The NXS and the XD, hard divers, they go right to they get right after it. Okay. You're banging the trees. As soon as it breaks free, it's going down again as deep as it can go for a time. And then we're fighting the bill now. So now it's going to start to climb on us. Okay. These characteristics are characteristics that you need to know. So if I have terrain like, let me see if I can do this. If I have terrain like that picture that we showed, okay, where's my little pointer pen? So now I know that my swimming bait is gonna. Am I on here? I can't even
Yeah,
see
you're
it.
dead nuts on.
Okay, so now we're going to see my swimming bait is going to swim me right through those treetops.
Yep.
Nice and easy. I'm not going to be all
Yeah.
buggled up in them and everything else. Okay, where if I was throwing one of my hard divers, it might, you know, dive down and then I'm stuck in here. Okay, so that's the swimmer, right? So if we go to, well, this
You
is
got like
going
a
to,
wind vortex in there, Frank? The
yeah,
paper's blowing all over the place.
this is going to suck. But if we go to
Yep.
the isolated one, I can get away with a hard diver. I don't have a lot of room to cover. I can get it down so it hits the stuff and comes right out of it. So it bangs into it and comes
Mm-hmm.
out of it, bangs into it and comes out of it. So there's different times where you're going to want the different types of bait. So if I have a gradual sloping terrain, you could get by with the DD22, you can get by with the Fat Free 7, and you could probably get by with these baits. All right.
Mm-hmm.
If they're deep enough, you got to go to the faster diver ones because you got to get it down to depth right away, and you won't have a long enough cast to make it. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
faster the diver is, the faster you could get it to depth. Just remember, you're going to be in the strike zone a little bit
This is really simple.
shorter.
I don't
Very
think a lot of people look at the crankbaits the way you just described it, and I'm sitting over here going, well, everybody has football heads, flipping jigs, and ball heads,
right.
and you don't do the same thing with every one, and they're all it's the same thing.
Same
Pin,
exact.
point, a drag, everything does it different. So now,
Mhm.
when you're walking down the dock and it's a cranking deal, and you see a guy who's a cranker
And he's
with
got 5 crankbait rods
yeah,
out
he's got like 11 crankbait rods
with
out. I
all
always
different
used to be like,
crankbaits.
all right, we get it, dude. You're cranking. You've got 11 nice setup. You're cranking. You made your point. Like you're letting everybody know. But at that level, there is it's not 11 of the identical crankbaits. It might be 2 or 3 of the same ones,
Right.
but it is
Different
all
colors.
about the angle and the understanding of boat positioning, angle, and location to
Correct.
present the bait the most effectively and keep it in the strike zone as long as possible.
Right. So your dive is important. Your deflective characteristics are important. Okay. And your colors are important. Normally, when I'm doing this cranking, I'll have, I'll have a natural shad pattern on and a hot shad pattern on, and then I'll have something real bright, like a chartreuse blue or
When
a
you going what
citrus,
with what? Why is that?
because sometimes the fish will react better to a different type of color. So I know by how they're hitting the bait if I need to maybe change color on the bait or even change to a different diving style bait, a hard diver versus a swimmer. If I cast it out and they got the last treble hook in their mouth and only one of the treble hooks in them, and I'm throwing a natural shad pattern, I'll switch to a hot shad pattern in the same bait. And then if the fish has the whole thing in his mouth, I know I'm dialed in. If I go to the hot one and again, maybe it's the last treble hook, or I get a couple of hits, bumps, and runs. You know how you'll feel a hit on a crankbait, boom, and you go, oh
Yep.
man, he didn't get it. Right?
Oh, there was one.
Right. Then you got to go, maybe you need a different vibration. And every bill has a different vibration. Every crankbait bill makes the bait do something different. So that's why you'll see 5 crankbaits out, because you have to be set up to figure it out. It's no different, like you said, Matt, like with a football jig, a structure jig, a
Ball
drop
head,
shot, a
drop
ball
shot.
head.
Uh,
Right, exactly.
okay, so
Okay.
answer me this then: timber bass, feeding bite or reaction bite?
Could be both. Could be 100% both. Ticking off the branches could be total reaction. When a bass comes up for a bait that's just over the top of the tree branches, total hunger feed. They're chasing it. They want it.
And okay, with electronics too, you idle over it. 2D is you can see fish that are separated on top, but when they get in the middle, you
It's tough.
might see a harder return. It kind of depends on the
It's
density of the
tough.
wood and how many branches and stuff. But
I, which okay, you just touched on something. 2D sonar. Um, when I'm on my 2D sonar, which in the beginning, that's how I found all these trees. I didn't have side imaging, or forward facing. So that's how I found all the trees. So what I would do is when I get on top of them, the best days to do it were the slick, flat, sunny days because I had the immense boat control. So I would get on top of these trees with my 2D sonar, and I would barely creep the boat along, and you could differentiate the game fish in the tree by streak marks in the tree. You could
mhm.
see them streak marking in the tree
Oh wow.
where the branches are branches and it's all gobbled up. If you see a hard return with a streak mark in it, you know it's a fish in that tree. It's different than the rest of the tree. Like all the branches might be doing this, and then you get a line that goes different than the branches. That's how I did it back then. Was I would say, oh shit, there's bass in this trees or game fish until
Mhm.
I caught them, and then I knew they weren't stripers. You know what I mean? Because the stripers will use them too.
Uh,
Unfortunately.
all right. I like all this. I get it. But so like, here's my deal. All right. So like on this one here, let's just say this is a row of trees that start here and it goes all the way up here.
Right.
Let's say there's 15 or 20 trees that are in what I would consider my target depth. Top
Mm,
10%, 15 to 25 foot deep above
right.
the thermocline bait in them. Are you always going to target on the most furthest out productive tree, or are you fishing all of it? You see what I'm saying in
Yeah,
the target depth?
the highest percentage spot is where the strike zone, where the top of the trees in the strike zone are on the drop,
Okay.
where the rest of the trees that go to the basin of that channel are completely not relevant. So you have a distinct taper in land, the trees come out, and then you're in the river channel.
Okay. So here's the thing. I am not 360 fishing. Like I could be over 120 foot of water.
That's irrelevant. It only matters where the tops of those trees are. You want that, you want that land mass. And here, most of the time, okay, if you look at that finger you're on, there's three plateaus, there's three tabletops on it. Your first tabletop, closest to the highest point of there, is from 32 to 35 feet. That's
Mm-hmm.
right where your hand is. That's the first tabletop. The second one, you see how far apart those contour
Yep.
lines are? That's a flatter, sloping thing. And then right at the end, it drops literally almost bluff like
High percentage
straight
spot
down,
tree right here.
right at the end of that finger.
Can also catch him on here. Way
Correct.
easier to target this.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's the whole plan of attack with these trees. Once you establish how they're relating to them. Now here, look, you might go on that finger. This is a good finger to talk about. You might go right where your hand is right now in the middle of it.
Mm-hmm.
Right on that 35-foot contour, just right there. And that might be the spot. That might be where all the bass are because that treetop might be in 15 feet below the surface. You follow me?
Mm-hmm.
Where the deeper you go, the deeper the treetops are going to be. And so if that's where the high percentage spot is, then I'm concentrating my efforts on the 35-foot bottom because those treetops are where the bass want to be. If the bass want to be deeper, you may move out deeper, et cetera,
Yeah.
et
You're
cetera.
applying the exact same concepts of every other pattern fishing. You're just doing it to the standing timber.
Exactly. It's no different. There is no difference. And you
This sounds
pick,
like a fantastic pattern to take a buddy who always talks crap but can't cast very well.
oh, dude,
You
he'll
can flog him on this.
just tell him to bring a lot of food because you're going to be eating all day. Yeah, it's kind of brutal if somebody's not using the right equipment
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of brutal because this is a particular pattern where everything you do has to be right or you won't catch them. You might catch one or two, but you won't catch them. I tried 8-pound fluorocarbon once to get them way down. I've even put lead strips right here on the bait to make that bait go way, way down. Okay, so there's little tricks that you can do to get a bait to really get down there because I want this profile bait. I want, you know, that 2 3/4 to 3 inch size body. Don't want a body that big.
Mm-hmm.
I want the littler body. Comes through the wood better. You don't have that long tailing hook as it rolls over a branch. The longer it is, that tailing hook can hook the branch. So I want these smaller, profile baits. There are times when the bigger body baits catch a better quality bite, but if you're constantly hanging up in the treetops, if you're constantly dredging, you're going to miss out because you're going to lose a lot of baits and you're going to be underneath the fish. The worst thing you could do is be under them because a suspending fish will never go down for a bait. They always feed up. We talk about this a lot on this show. That's a fact. Now, if you're talking about fish relating to the bottom, you're not fishing standing submerged trees. You're just not doing it. You're fishing shallower where you're above the thermocline, and the bass could be anywhere in that tree, anywhere in it. That's really hard to fish. There's too many of them. So this is a fantastic pattern. It's one of my favorite ways to crankbait fish all time.
Have you touched on water clarity?
No, I really didn't. Muddy water will kill you in
Okay,
this
that's all
bite.
I wanted to know.
Yeah,
That's what I thought. It seemed like the
yeah.
clearer it is,
The better it is.
the better it is.
100%. If I'm on a lake with tons of standing timber and this water is filthy dirty, unfortunately, we're going to be not targeting standing treetops. We're just not going to do it because we're
What
going
about
to.
a place like
Yeah.
a Sam Rayburn or Toledo Bend where you do have a lot that's breaking the surface?
Okay, so what?
I know that's a whole different
It's a
show, but
whole different.
can you apply some of the same
Yeah, because you can get on the
submerged
transitions,
ones?
the submerged ones,
Okay.
but there's a lot of times in lakes like Toledo Bend that's just chock full of back in the day when we fished Toledo Bend and you looked across Toledo Bend, all you saw were trees.
Yeah. Now they're
Okay,
just stumps.
the hurricanes and all the winds come and they break them down at the top of the water level, so now you don't see them. You don't
These are like
see as
Petra.
many.
These trees are like
They're
look
like
like that
concrete.
out your window. The ones that
Yeah,
you're talking about fishing. They're just
big.
underwater and the hardwood keeps them.
From Yeah, I mean, eventually over the
Mm-hmm.
course of time they'll deteriorate. Some of the skinny branches will, and they've just become,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the bigger branches stay whole.
No,
But
that's good stuff.
when I'm fishing a place like Toledo Bend, I kind of ignore the trees and
Yeah.
just
Yeah,
structure
we've
fish
talked
the
about
lake.
that
We
before.
talked about that. You have
Uh
to. There's too many.
I wrote a couple more points down. You care if I
I
go over them
want,
real quick?
no, yeah, I want 'em.
Retrieving lures that you do snag. You are going to get hung up. You are going to get snagged. Let's say you have a productive tree. Are you eating that lure, or is it messing up the school to put a plug knocker down there, to go over it, to pull on it? What are you doing? You are on a productive pattern. You know you're getting bit, and you're stuck.
Diagram. So an easy, cheap plug knocker. Okay, this is so easy, and they make them. Basically, it's like a 2-ounce piece of lead and a paper clip in them. You take your line and you put it inside the paper clip.
Mm-hmm.
Get right over top of the bait. You hook that thing on your line and you let it go down, keeping your line tight. You hold it tight. As soon as that boom, you'll feel it hit the bait. It hits the bait, and then you just shake the rod, and then the weight of that plug knocker will hit against the bill of the bait and eventually dislodge it.
Okay.
And then you can reel it back
But I
up.
mean, as far as screwing up the fish, are there
Well,
times where you'll just reel down and it's a
yeah,
lost?
if I'm in a tournament, I'm catching them off that stand of trees, I'm just gonna break it.
As far as fighting the fish once you hook them too, this has been an issue with me in the past. Oh, I got one. Now he's stuck in it. Do you have to? You got to move that fish, don't you? Once you hook
Yeah,
them.
I first of all, most of the time when you're doing submerged standing trees, the fish are coming up to get the bait. So they're actually coming out of the trees.
Yeah.
You have to remember something. It's not like I'm digging a DD22 in a rock pile where it's constantly hitting the bottom. This is just hitting a branch, hitting a branch, hitting a branch. The object isn't to bury it down, so it's got to walk its way over a branch, bury it down, walk its way over. You just want to tick it, tick it, tick it. You know what I mean? So they're coming up for it. Once you get them, I just keep them coming until I get them far enough above that tree where they want to
Mm-hmm.
fight their way to the top. Because you know how it is. When you're fishing shallow, you catch a big bass. A lot of times they dig, man. They want you down there. In the open water, a lot of times when you hook one, they want to come to the surface. They want to
Okay.
fight to the surface. So I don't have a whole lot of issues where I get them in a tree and can't get them out because most of the time they're already coming out of the tree to get the crankbait.
Good learning experience here that I had. I remember the 2015 Open. It was in the fall on Table Rock. Fish with my buddy Darren. And I was catching a few on a football jig, dragging it down the rock. And I could see the trees. I had side imaging and stuff. And I could see all the trees out there, see it. And I was having some difficult time catching them out. But I could catch some fish up shallow. I wasn't dialed in. First year fishing the Opens. Not saying I knew what I was doing. Well, he draws Mike McClellan on day 2 of the Open. He's like, totally worth my time, right? Mike McClellan, one of the best.
Right.
So after the day, I'm eliminated. I'll tell you 2 things happened that day. I weighed in 4 fish, and I had one fish with 3 hours left, and I'm off a point, and I'm casting up to the point, and I'm dragging the football head off. As soon as it gets to 20 feet, I'm reeling the football head in. Well, there are trees between me and the bank. I'm dragging it off, and I'm tired of breaking off, so I'm reeling it up past the trees. Well, I catch 3 keeper smallmouth burning a football head over 60 foot of water through the tops of the trees, taking the tops of the trees. To me, I'm just reeling them back in. At the time, I was like, oh, lucky bite, caught a bite, reeling it in. No, I was ticking the tops of the trees. I was doing what you just described without the skill set to do it. So we get done for that day and stuff. Mike has a decent day. I asked Darren, and I practiced, 3 or 4 days. I asked Darren, I said, well, what did Mike do that was different? He said, dude, he fished a lot of the same banks that you did in practice that we didn't catch anything off of. And I said, really? And he said, yeah. He said, except he fished them 50 feet out and he cranked them. And I said, what?
Yeah.
And he said he cranked the tops of the trees on the same banks that you were fishing. And I said, how many did he catch? He's like, 25. And I was like, you're kidding. And he's like, no. And he said, he walked through it. He said he was just ticking the tops of the trees with the plug, and they were about 15, 16 foot down. And he said it was just go down and do. And he said, and it'd load up. He said, your boat where we were seeing the timber under it. So he was catching them out of that exact spot.
Yes, 100%.
It was exactly the show that you just did, Frank.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's it. And Table Rock is where I discovered this, by the way.
Yeah.
I was, like I said, I rolled over the tops of the trees. I saw fish in them and dropped a drop shot and a spoon down there and caught them out of the tops of the trees, and then thought there had to be a better way to catch them. So
that was packed full of education. We leave anything out? We get to cover everything as far as fishing the deep trees.
I mean, we talked about swimmers, hard divers. We talked about my 4 all-time favorite crankbaits: DD22, Fat Free 7, Norman NXS, Strike
I'm not
King
familiar
XD.
with the NSX.
NXS. If you look at the NXS, it's got, you see the bill design in it, how it's like that.
Yep. Slightly upturned.
Right. So if you look at the Strike King, they're very similar.
Oh, okay. That's what cuts through the water quicker, less friction, so it dives quicker.
Dives right down to depth,
How did that
which
go?
is nice. Yeah. But the DD22 guys will come through wood better than any crankbait made. Deep
Like
wood.
everyone's got some DD22s in their box.
Yeah, almost you have to. You almost have to. Anybody my age will have them. I don't know about your age, man.
Deep Timber, number 75. Day 4 with Frank Scalish. Very educational. We had down imaging, side imaging views. We had prepared graphs, handwritten graphs. Handwritten. Oh, that was a good one, man.
We covered it all today.
We have. This has been another Day 4 with Frank Scalish. We'll see you guys next week.